security guard coming to you from Portland, Oregon. Just doing a little late night tap in, see how you guys are doing. Hopefully, you guys had a good day at work. If you were on shift, if it's your weekend and you're not having to work today, congratulations. I hope you're enjoying your day off. Um, I was just thinking the other day, it's been a long and winding road to this point where I am today. And there's so many stories that have led me to this position of security. And, I've often told you guys on this channel, some of the things that I've done, some of the things that I've been through. But I really do have a real wide, extensive experience working in security. The more that I think about the odd jobs and things that I've done over the past 10 to 15 years. And it's been crazy. You know what I mean? So, man, I just want to come on here and talk about some of those jobs. So let me think. And guys, look, I'm at that point in my life where I'm legitimately getting old. My dad, my uncles, people that I care about in my life, they would say, you know, I'm at that age where I have forgotten more than I've learned, or I'm at that age where, I've forgotten more than you learn. I truly feel like that. There's so many things that I've done in my life and in my career. I feel like I've lived 15 lives. That TV show Quantum Leap, if you guys remember that show from back in the 80s or the 90s, I feel like that's my life. I've done so many different things. So I'm going to try and go down the path here and lay out my time working in security and law enforcement and see if we can get from there to here. So this is a kind of a rambling session, all right? So let's get to it. So first and foremost, coming out of high school, U.S. Air Force, right? And I do want to share this story with you guys. I've been meaning to share this story with you guys forever. So first experience with security in the Air Force. I'm in boot camp, Lackland Air Force Base, 331st Squadron. And the way that it works, if you guys have never been in the military, when you go to boot camp, you're in your barracks. And the barracks at Lackland Air Force Base, when I was there at least, they were 3 floors, right? So on the bottom floor, you had what's called your sister flight. The middle floor is the floor that we were on, and then above us was another sister flight. So you have 3 flights in one squadron, and each flight has their own drill instructors. Now, as you can imagine in the military, all the drill instructors fuck with the other flights, right? So our drill instructor in the middle fucks with the flight above us and the flight below, so on and so forth. So one of my first experiences with security is when you're in the barracks. I think you had maybe 25 guys on one side of the barracks and 25 guys on the other side of the barracks, if I'm not mistaken. And in the middle, there's kind of a hallway. And at the front of that hallway, there's a door. And the door has a window about this big, right? And then off to the right of that door, there was a huge sign. And the sign literally had 5 things that you had to ask somebody. So if someone came up to the door and knocked on the door and they wanted to get into the barracks, if you were working security, you had to look through this little window and literally take your finger and touch number 1, right? And so number 1 would say, "Sir or ma'am, how can I help you?" You literally had to touch it and then recite it, right? So early on in boot camp, we've gone through the instructions and they've told us how to do this. And then, you rotate out and people have to work that door duty. I don't remember how it was delegated, but every person has to work door duty at some point in time, right? So there's a guy working the door. It's a Sunday. Our drill instructor is gone. So it's all of the flight, all 50 of us in there. This one guy is working the door detail, and his last name was Albanese, like Albanese or Albanese, something like that, like an Italian kid from New York. He had that New York swag, that New York, Italian, way of talking. And, he was all forget about it. We love this guy, right? So he's working the door. So the upstairs drill instructor comes down and starts banging on the door. Boom, 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 boom. And he's like, open the fucking door. And Albanese's working security at the door, right? So he slides the thing over, he looks out the window, and he touches the board, and he goes, sir, how may I help you? And the drill instructor's like, don't ask me no fucking questions. Open the door, motherfucker. Open the door. Like he's trying to get him to break protocol and just open the door. And so we hear all this commotion, and we all come from either side of the bays, right, into that hallway, and we're looking, and we can see that Albanese shook, right? He's nervous. You can tell he's nervous. He's like shaking. And the drill instructor's like, open the goddamn door. Don't make me ask you again, motherfucker. Open the door. And he's like, the second thing that he's supposed to say is, sir, may I see your authority to enter? He's like, sir, may I see your authority to enter? And the drill instructor's kicking the door. I said, open the door. I'm going to rip your fucking head off, right? And so Albanese's like shaking, and we're all like, oh, man, he's going to break. We're like, don't do it, bro. Don't do it. Don't do it. And you can just see. And he's like, he goes to number 3, and he's like, if you touch that board, I'm kicking you out of the Air Force. I'm kicking you out of the Air Force. And before you know it, Albanese opens the door, and we're just like, oh, no, no. And the drill instructor comes in, and he's like, what are you doing? What's your protocol? What are you supposed to do? You're supposed to do that. And he's like up in this kid's face. And you just see like this calm come over Albanese, right? And he says, sir, permission to speak. And the drill instructor says, say it, what? And he goes, sir, the door is broken, sir. And the drill instructor just completely stops. He goes, what? He goes, sir, the door is broken. If you would have pulled a little bit harder, it would have opened. I didn't want to get us in trouble. And the drill instructor turns around, he looks at the door, and Albanese goes, step out, I'll show you. And as soon as the drill instructor steps out the door, Albanese shuts it. And I mean, it's like he steps out the door, and the drill instructor realizes like, this motherfucker just got me, right? And he turns around to grab the door, and Albanese shuts it. And the drill instructor looks at him, and he goes, open the fucking door now. And Albanese just looks at him, and he goes, sir, how may I help you? And we all were just like, oh shit. And we like ran, and we like picked him up, and we're like flipping off the drill instructor. Like that was the dopest moment. That was literally my first experience with security, right? Protocol, post orders, securing a location, right? Watching someone communicate, watching someone buckle, watching someone think on their feet. So when I was thinking to myself, like, what was my first experience with security? All the way back 26, 27 years ago, U.S. Air Force boot camp. That was my first experience with security, right? So from there, I'm thinking to myself, like, what would be my next experience with security? And you know, guys, I won't bore you with like the long aspect of the story, but I got divorced in 2008. Clearly I had a car, everything. So I moved to the middle of right outside of Philadelphia, and in order to make ends meet, you know, I had child support, I had bills, I had just filed for bankruptcy. Like I was in a bad situation, right? So in order to make ends meet, I get a job working at this nightclub as a bouncer. You know, I'm a big guy at the time. I'm like 29, 30 years old. So I start working security as a bouncer, just working the door, you know, and dealing with like college football players and like college frat guys, you know, trying to get into fights. And, you know, I had been married for 10 years. I had 4 young children. Like I had not lived a lifestyle where I was out in the streets, so to speak. So like after being married for 10 years and getting divorced and then being in this nightclub environment, like that was so crazy and so new to me. But within, you know, 3 to 4 months, they made me head of security because I was one of the older people there. I was one of the people that had a lot of experience in terms of the military, stuff like that. That carried some weight. So I become head of security. And after working there for 6 months, I had an opportunity to apply. So this is like a county prison, right? So I applied for this county prison, and they tell me, we've never in the history of the time that this prison had been open, this prison had been in this area since like the early 1900s. They had never had any black employees, okay? And the county was forcing this jail to hire black employees. So me and another guy became the first 2 black jailers at this county prison that had like, 250 people tops. I mean, it was a really small jail. So needless to say, this was an experience for me. I had never worked in a jail setting. I'd never worked in a prison setting. I had never been in an environment where, I'm working around people that are in this prison system, that's this rural prison system. And it was a different experience. Everything about how I carry myself now as a security guard, I learned at that jail, at that county prison. 250 inmates, male, female, ICE detainees that they had in a gym. Like, the first day that I ever worked at this prison, I was on the D block, and I think there might have been 40 guys in this one bay, right? Up tier, lower tier, 2 people in a cell, 20 cells, 40 people. First day, I'm on the fucking yard, and this guy comes over and he tells me, he's like, yo, you're the first black guy I've ever seen in here. Like, congratulations. And I'm just like, oh, yo, thanks. I'm 29, 30 years old. And he's like, just remember, this is where you work. This is where we live. Like, do your job. We know you have a job to do. Don't come in here on some bullshit. Like, I've told you guys this story before. Like, we will throw you over the tier, right? And I believed him. They put me in a solitary confinement unit because there was only 8 cells. And in this solitary confinement unit, there's 8 cells. There's 4 cells on the top, 4 cells on the bottom, and they're single cells. So there's generally, at any given time, either 8 people, or it might be 3 people, 2 people, small prison. And they only used the solitary confinement cells for people that were in like trouble, or if they had a state inmate that had done something egregious and was going to be transferred to federal prison. If it had happened in that county, this was like a transitional area. So the first night that I'm working in the solitary confinement unit by myself, I go in and I'm doing mail. So there's like maybe 4 or 5 guys that are in there, some on the top tier, some on the bottom, and I'm delivering mail. And while I'm up on the top tier, I hear somebody say, CO. And I'm like, what? And so like I kind of like come down the stairs and I look around, and at the very end on the bottom cell, there was a guy whose name was Kuya. One name, Kuya, Native American guy. This guy at the state prison, one of the state prisons in Pennsylvania, had murdered his cellmate and was propping his cellmate up, like having his cellmate stand up against the wall or lay in his bed with a book. He had him in there for like 2 days before they realized that this guy was dead. So they have him there at our prison. They're going to transport him to a federal prison. I look down off the top tier. This dude is standing in the day room, like literally standing there. This big, swole Native American dude. And I'm like, and he goes, make sure you tell your boy that was in here before you, when he leaves, to make sure my door is closed. And I'm like, you got to be fucking kidding me. Like, I'm literally just standing there at the top of this tier, and this dude is looking at me. And he slowly walks back to his cell. He gets in the cell and he closes the door. This is somebody who literally, whenever he goes to shower, he's out of his cell 1 hour a day. We're putting dog leashes on this guy, handcuffed, 2 people, 2-man hold, like craziness, right? Craziness. So I say all that to say that my experience working in the county jail, those 2 crazy experiences at the very beginning of starting there, the rest of my time there was so much fun. I had a fellow Air Force veteran named Andrew Schmid. he and I just made great friends. We worked the night shift. We had such a good time, and we kept it cool. Like, we had great camaraderie. We got along with the inmates. We kept it very professional. We were never rude, disrespectful. You know, the same way that I talk to you guys, that's how I was talking to them. We had it made, and we had a great system. But the people that were running the prison, they did not like the way that Andrew and I worked. They didn't like that we were happy. They didn't like that we laughed and that we joked around, and it caused problems. It caused problems. Now, looking back, a lot of the problems were based on the fact that they didn't like the fact that I was there. They didn't like that they were being forced to have to hire me, number one. They didn't like the fact that I was there and I was different, number two. And number three, that I didn't have a us versus them mentality towards the inmates. And that became something that was way more prevalent when I tried to go to the state correctional system, right? So I had some negative issues racially that happened at this prison. Not going to get into it because I have an NDA on that situation. But it wasn't long before I decided that I was going to move on from the county prison and try my hand at the state prison. Now, I put all this time and effort. If you guys have ever worked for a state agency, if you've ever worked for a law enforcement agency, you know the background process, the interview process, all of that stuff. It's super involved. So it took me almost a year to go through the entire process to finally get hired to work at a state prison in Pennsylvania. Now, the experience that I had when I was working at the county prison was 180 degrees different when I went to the state prison. When I went to the state prison, they were not fucking around. There was no, the biggest thing is that from day one, when I got to the state prison, they were like, there will not be any like camaraderie between us and the prisoners. It is a us versus them mentality. There's not going to be any like dapping people up. There's not going to be any high fives. Like, we don't talk to them like they're our friends. We don't have cordial conversations. Like, it's us versus them. And I didn't operate well like that. I would never operate well like that, right? So it wasn't long before I realized that working in that state prison system was not going to work for me. So I get out of that situation, and a friend of mine is working for Allied Barton. So he's like, look, you know, let's get it's called your PA Act 235. That allows you to work as an armed guard. So I had my 235 card, your guard card, and I start working for Allied Barton. And when I'm working for Allied Barton, the first couple of gigs that I did was just working on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. Once you get onto the turnpike, it's like 30 miles before you can get off of it. So if there's any road construction that needs to be done, they have these little like side roads that they can pull off on, and they have these gates, these hidden gates. So Allied Barton had us at these hidden gates while they were doing road construction, and we would work from 6 o'clock at night to 6 o'clock in the morning, and that got me in at the very early stages of working for Allied Barton. From that, I went on to working courtroom security as a bailiff for the Workmen's Compensation Court of Pennsylvania. So people that would get hurt at work in Pennsylvania, they have everything down to your fingers it has a price on it, right? So like, you cut a finger off at work, there's a set price. It's already laid out. You cut your arm off at work, it's already laid out. You break your back, you can't walk, you have issues with your feet, anything, it's all laid out. So it's very little in terms of like arbitration or arguing back and forth. But in these workman compensation courts, people would flip out. They would flip out because they weren't getting what they thought they should get, or they weren't happy with their severance package. One of the craziest things that I saw working in this workman compensation court is that the railroad has a guy whose job it is to make sure that one circuit breaker is off. That's his only job. And they pay this guy a ton of money to make sure that this one circuit breaker, this one lever is down so that there's no power on the track. This guy on this day was not paying attention, did not have that lever down, and this employee of the railroad did something on the track and he electrocuted the shit out of himself. It blew off one of his arms. It blew off the other side's legs. It completely fried his head. This dude looked like Freddy Krueger. And they wheeled him in like on a Hannibal Lecter type shit. And I was like, this dude is going to get paid, right? That was like the craziest thing that I had ever seen. From there, the guy that got me the job working for Allied Barton, he became a Pennsylvania state constable. And at the time, the work for Pennsylvania State Constable, if you're not aware, it's a sworn law enforcement officer position where you can be voted in or appointed by a judge. It's very similar to a sheriff's deputy. But instead of working, since it's so rural and it's so spread out, you have all of these magistrates that are like local judges for small municipalities. And you can work for one magistrate, you can work for, multiple magistrates. So I got appointed by a judge in a borough that did not have a state constable. The only thing as a state constable that you're required to do is to work the voting polls. You are the law enforcement officer for the voting polls, okay? But aside from that, you can serve process, you can arrest on misdemeanor warrants, you can transport to prisons or jails on felony warrants. Like you're working like a sheriff's deputy, but you're working for the magistrates. It's a very, very interesting position, and depending on where you are, who you're working for in the judicial system, you're going to do more work or less work depending on what they have for you. But it's a very interesting position that gives you all of the authority of a law enforcement officer in terms of when you're working for that magistrate. Very, very cool job. Did that up until the time that I left Pennsylvania and moved to Missouri. And when I moved to Missouri in 2016, my thought process was that I was done with security. Oh, one more thing that I did. While working as a state constable, there was a pro wrestling organization called Pennsylvania Wrestling Incorporated, Pennsylvania Wrestling Alliance. It was a regional promotion that was tied to WWE. So since it's in Pennsylvania, it's on the East Coast, what they would do is they would have WWE wrestlers who had either recently retired or were coming out of retirement or were trying to rehab after an injury. They would come and wrestle in this local organization. So they hired state constables. They hired us to do security for the events, but to also do security for the wrestlers themselves. I got to do security for Kevin Nash. I got to meet Al Snow, X-Pac, AJ Lee, EC3, Billy Gunn. Like, it was a great fucking experience. Like, we would literally pick these people up from the airport. We would transport them to the location. Each wrestler had a different, set of requirements or circumstances, things that they wanted the fans to be able to do, things they didn't want the fans to be able to do. And it's crazy to think that we were protecting these wrestlers because, like, Kevin Nash is 7'2". Like, it's insane how big these people were. But that was another avenue of our job. So all of that led up to me leaving, and I thought that I was done with security, never to get back into it, never to want to do it again until 2020. When 2020 happened, I'm gonna be honest with you guys, like, everything that happened with the George Floyd situation, but I was sitting at home and I was watching the New York City police union chief. And during this time, whether you agree with what happened in 2020 or not, early in 2020, when the riots were kicking off and the accountability was coming down for police, the cries for accountability, I watched the New York City union chief get on television, and he was chastising the people, not just the news, not just the people that were there, but he had this entire union behind him. And people were asking for accountability. They were asking for transparency. They were asking for something other than what was being done in that situation. you know what, if you don't like us, if you don't trust us, if you want us to change, then we're gonna quit. And I kept hearing that, we're gonna quit. I kept hearing that, we don't want to be here if you're gonna make us change. We don't want to be here if you don't trust us. And I just thought that in that situation, at that moment, with everybody being in a position where we were all having to watch what was happening on television because the world was shut down, I thought, man, this is a great opportunity for us to all have these conversations, right? The people that support law enforcement, the people that have an issue with law enforcement, the people that are in the middle, this is a great opportunity for us to all have a legitimate conversation about what's going on, how we got here, and how we can move forward. And I watched all of these police departments, all these police officers turn their nose up and say, you know what, if it's about accountability, if it's about transparency, if it's about doing something different than what we've been doing, we're leaving. And I thought to myself, and so I applied for my local police department. I went through the interview process. I went through the physical. I wanted it. I wanted that job so bad. And the lieutenant reached out to me and he says, we're going to bring you on. Here's the deal. It's a 5-year contract and it's $32,000 a year. And I told my wife, and she broke down and started crying. And she says, I don't want to live in Missouri. I don't want you to work for $32,000 a year and be a police officer. You can make $32,000 a year doing Instacart. And so I made the decision with her to try my hand as a sheriff's deputy out here in Portland. And that's where we will stop the story tonight. Because moving out here to become a sheriff's deputy is how I got here in the first place. And clearly, I'm not a sheriff's deputy, right? So there's a part 2 to that. And we'll get into that maybe tomorrow night. All right. You see these comments here. There's a ton of comments. On the clock, brother, from Med J. Good to hear you. Good to see you. Thank you, Oscar C. We appreciate you sharing. Absolutely. Matthew West, yo, what's good? Getting ready to head into work and preparing for tomorrow. I have practice. Oh, police physical fitness test. Hey, good luck, my man. Good luck, Matthew. Everybody say good luck to Matthew. Oscar says good luck to Matthew. Yep. Matthew West says thank you. Gary from Louisiana. What's up, big man? Hey, how are you? Nino Brown says take that hat off and burn it. I'm not doing that. Matthew West retracted a message. Ashley says hi. She says nice beard. I gotta do what I can. And yeah, Mo Bubbler says the physical. And Matthew says the beard is hot. All right, guys. Easy. Okay, we're gonna pick this up tomorrow with part 2. But I really appreciate the opportunity to sit here and share with you guys. I know I'm rambling tonight, but we don't have a lot of opportunities where we just chop it up and talk like this. We got to do this more, okay? I want you guys to know about me. I want you to know what I've been through and what led me to this point, because we all have a story, right? All right. You guys be safe tonight. I love you guys. I'll see you guys tomorrow, okay?